Next, I wanted to ask you a question of perspective, a perspective that I've been dying to sort of hear for a while. Because over the past 10 years, as I've kind of been online reviewing music, being a part of many music discussions, I've gotten into numerous fights over your mother's music and sort of defending that and defending sort of the relevance of it, how groundbreaking a lot of it was, how much talent it required, how much vision it required. I mean, what is it like for you personally to be a part of this incredible split in rock history where there's such a gap of appreciation between what your father did artistically and what your mother did artistically in music and performance art and beyond? And obviously, like, their artistic trajectories intertwine so deeply in your father's own discography, and she's an essential part of this compilation. So, I mean, generally, thoughts on people not really fully appreciating, you know, your mother's musical perception, you know, in terms of her ability to influence punk, indie, alternative dance, art pop. Go.
Sure. Well, firstly, let me say, I knew I liked you, Fantano. I knew it. I grew up more immersed in my mother's music than my dad's because my dad wasn't around. My mom was making records. I wound up touring in her band when I was like a teenager still. I saw her make like 5 or 6 or 7 albums with like serious producers in studios. So I learned what a mixing console was. I learned compression. I learned microphones. I learned delay, everything from my mom producing records. So it actually took me a while to catch up with understanding where people are coming from. Like, it took me longer because I thought that was just kind of cool. That, you know, she obviously has a very alternative vocal style. She has kind of 2 hats that she wears. There's the super avant-garde early Plastic Ono Band stuff where she's just like screaming her ass off, which I think Marshall McLuhan talked about as the birth of punk rock, actually, her first Plastic Ono Band album in 1971. And then she has the other hat that she wears, which is a pop songwriter. And I actually think she's a very underrated pop songwriter objectively. I think for a long time, until recently, people didn't accept that she produced the Imagine album and wrote the song Imagine with my dad. I think people heard rumors of that, or they knew that she was credited as a producer on Imagine, but they just sort of assumed because of a confluence of things, the fact that she's a woman, the fact that she's, you know, odd and avant-garde, they sort of assumed that she was just given a sort of a credit, a gestural credit that wasn't real. But the truth is, she did produce one of the most successful albums of all time. She co-wrote one of the most successful songs of all time, Imagine. So just on an objective level, you can't really argue with those creds, right? And if you watch the footage of How Do You Sleep being recorded and the Imagine album, you see my dad is asking her every single moment. He's like, what do you think, Yoko? What do you think? And she's like, I think you should turn the bass down. I think that he's playing it too loud, whatever. You know, she's obviously telling him what to do. So you can say you like her or you don't. But if you like the Imagine record, which many people seem to because it was very, you know, successful and still is to this day, then she is a great record producer at the least. And, you know, she's one of the most successful songwriters if you consider that she wrote Imagine with my dad, which she did. And she was recently given the credit for. So yeah, I think I'm sorry if this is a long answer, but
this is the answer and the validation that I personally want as somebody who's had this opinion for a long time. I mean, not even just a fan of the stuff that you're talking about, but also a fan of some of her solo works and singles, like Walking on Thin Ice, for example. Like, that song is an incredible dance song, and like what that track preceded as well. Like, there were so many like alternative and weird and super like groovy dance influences and sounds on that were so alternative for the time, and, you know, aesthetics that would be adopted pretty like quickly, you know, in the oncoming years.
Yeah. I mean, and she was influential. The B-52s did Rock Lobster and had a kind of homage to her vocal style that my dad actually noticed and pointed out to her. And yeah, I mean, Tony Levin's playing bass on Walking on Thin Ice. I mean, he's like the legend, you know, who played with the later King Crimson. And my dad's guitar playing on Walking on Thin Ice is, I think, my dad said was his favorite guitar he'd ever played. It's this kind of thing. Yeah. And he was very proud of that. And yes, look, I really think you probably have to have alternative taste, or like, underground taste, or be, have sympathy for alternative culture to get really into all of her records. But I mean, I'm an indie kid, so, you know, because my mom's Yoko Ono, but I also grew up playing in more indie bands, and I was on Grand Royal, the BC's label, which was pretty indie vibes, musically speaking. So yeah, I love those records. I produced 2 records with my mom. I think she's great, but I know she's not for everyone. And the older I get, the more I realize, like, okay, when I listen to the way she vocalizes, sometimes I'm like, I see how that doesn't, how it doesn't appeal to a lot of people, because in my view, they have a more conservative taste. But my favorite Miles Davis records are, Big Fun, On the Corner, Bitches Brew, and Live Evil, which, at the time, I think those were a shock to the kind of blues fans. But I like out music, so yeah, for me it's cool. But I also totally have empathy and understanding for those who for whom it's not their cup of tea.
And one more thing before I go on to the next question, just for further frame of reference of the influence. Our next guest, who we're going to be talking to, alternative and experimental hip hop trio Clipping. I don't know how familiar you are with their work, but their new record, the final song on it, is a take on your mother's Secret Piece performance.
Oh, that's so cool! I gotta check them out. I haven't yet. I feel embarrassed now, but I will check them out.
No, don't be embarrassed. Not everybody hears everything, but it's just interesting to know. Like, they literally tried to follow the rules of the process piece, as it were, and then sort of do their own version for the end of their album. So
the real truth is also, when I was talking about learning from watching her make records. I really did learn how to mix from her. I mean, so she may have a very avant-garde, John Cage influenced, wild kind of guttural vocal style, but she also is a very legitimately good mixer. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because she learned to make records around probably the best producers and engineers in the world with my dad. So she definitely knows what she's doing when it comes to just a legitimate mix. And she taught me pretty much everything I know that wasn't self-taught. I learned from her in terms of where the vocal sits in a mix, really technical stuff. So yeah, she knows what she's doing.
Thank you very much for watching this interview clip over on TND Streams. To see the full interview, click on the video link next to my head or down below, or hit up the link to subscribe to the channel or see our Patreon page to support what we do and get some extra bonus monthly content in the process. Anthony Fantano, forever.